Hey kids, wanna make some miniatures? Welcome back to another tutorial video. Great to have all of you guys back. So continuing our forging process on our Tyranid start collecting box, we're going to want to gather some essential tools, X-Acto knives. I like to use the fat one to scrape, the thinner ones to cut, clippers, super glue is definitely going to come in handy. But yeah, I mean, this box, it's gonna be a challenge, not gonna lie. I'm gonna try to get through it all. Just showing you guys some content of the box for those of you that have not seen a start collecting box. You get your standard manual. These are just instructions on how to build the figurines, some rules towards the end. As you can see, lots of variety, different combinations, and the actual sprues. If anybody is new to the hobby out there, the miniatures do not come assembled. You have to assemble them yourselves, cut them out of these sprues, sand them down, and since again there's so much variety, you have to be careful with what you glue together, that it fits into your army composition, that it's what you want. Another great reason as to why do this project: not only will you be able to get a large army for relatively cheap, but you will also be able to have so much variety in your army, so many options to choose from that you would typically have to spend a bunch of money to get, or just would be impossible otherwise. For this video, we're going to be using Gene Stealers to start off with. I love Gene Stealers. They're one of my favorite units in the game, just from their lore to their look to just how they shred everything on the board in melee combat. I mean, is he not just the most kawaii thing you've ever seen in your life? Look at it! Absolutely love them. Always wanted to have a large horde of them just running across the table towards my opponent. But considering these suckers are about $25 for a small box of them, I never really had the urge to go and spend the money. So I'm hoping that with just one trial unit of mold and one trial unit of plastic, we will be able to make a large army of. So here's my forging plan for these. I'm going to go ahead and pick out the parts for the Gene Stealer that I like the most, and I'm going to make as many of that one particular Gene Stealer as I can. Since this is my first time doing this and I don't really know exactly how much materials I'm going to be using, I would rather start off with only making one variety and have enough left over for the other models in this kit. Let's pick out our spiky bits and get forging. Alright, now that we're done clipping out the parts that we are wanting to replicate, next comes one of the most important parts of this process, which is cleaning the actual pieces themselves. After you've clipped them out, you will notice you have a little plastic stub. Now, when I'm molding miniatures, whatever I'm molding, I like to clean extra well, because any small detail will show up in your mold. So you just want to take your time. My technique is I like to scrape off the little plastic stop with the X-Acto knife, file it down with a filer or heavier grit sandpaper. Go back and just scrape off the plastic just a little bit with the X-Acto knife again, and finally finish it off with a really fine sandpaper and just make sure that it's smooth, make sure there's no scratches or markings. You just want to get this as perfect as you can, because again, it will show up in your mold, any small imperfection. So definitely worth taking a little bit of extra time in this process. Now we got all of our pieces fully cleaned, shiny, very smooth, just like baby horse's bottom. Yeah, good luck sleeping at night with that image in your head now. Anyways, let's get to the actual forging process. So now that we have our pieces cut out, we just want to go ahead and pick them up, grab the piece. Come on. God damn it! I Papa Nurgle's balls, like this is uncomfortable. Anyways, let's get back to forging. So what you want to do now is you want to go ahead and grab your flat Legos to make the base. Then we want to stick all of our pieces in there. This is just to give us a general outline of how big we need to make the base. Always keep in mind that the brick Legos, they're two rows thick. You'll see what I mean here in a second. But we're trying to make this as compact as possible. Again, our goal here is to only go through one trial unit in order to make a full army. So here, let's go ahead and get out the actual bricks to start building our walls. That's right, guys, we're gonna build a wall. So we're gonna just, again, very compact, very small. As you can see, each brick takes off around 2 of those rows. Now this is my personal favorite step because we get to use that plastilina. And from here, now the plasticine comes very rough, so you just want to get small pieces out of it and stretch it out like I just did here. Really use your fingers to get every little nook and cranny in our foundation. You do want enough in there to make it one wall of Legos thick. And just, again, pat it down, very compact. We want to make sure that it's nice and thick. Extra thick! Now, once you've got a good amount of plasticine on your base, we want to go ahead and put the biggest piece of the figurine in. And you want to make sure to leave enough space between it and the edge that when we're done molding it won't spill over. Now you want to get it halfway deep into the plasticine. I'm gonna put some images up right now as to what I'm referring to. Is essentially all the nooks and crannies. You don't want to fully cover them. You want to make sure that the figurine is fully only halfway in. That way we get a nice finished cast. Now again, we're trying to finish this product with only one trial unit of the mold and the cast, so again, very, very compact. This isn't your standard mold process. We're gonna have, usually with molds, you have one point of entry for the liquid plastic. In this, since again we're having everything be super compact, we're gonna have multiple points of entry. That's why here you see that I'm leaving some parts closer to the edge. That way we can just go ahead and pour in the plastic, the liquid plastic from there. You'll see what I mean here in a second. Another super helpful tip from just experience, you want to make sure that the thicker, the bigger parts of the individual pieces are towards the edge, and then the thinner parts are towards the interior of the mold. This way you can just use the law of gravity essentially to make sure you get a smoother flow. If you want to see where I position the pieces in more detail, just pause the video, but overall it should look a little something like this towards the end. The next step in the process is what's going to require the most thinking. Essentially, we're going to be making our secure indents, and also we're going to be making the cavities for the mold itself. Now the secure indents, basically this is going to be the part of the mold. They're kind of like teeth. They keep the mold together. Here's a picture. Now you can use a spoon or a pen for making the security indents. Spoon preferably to make the cavities, since they're going to be essentially kind of like water channels, water canals. The cavities are what allows us to pour in or inject the liquid plastic that will eventually harden to make our miniature. Now I've gone ahead and bought these special tools to help me out. They were fairly cheap. I think this was like $5 at Hobby Lobby. Again, you can just use a spoon. There's no need to splurge on these tools. They just made life easier for me. So these canals, chambers, are essentially going to be our sprues. I'd advise you to take as much time as you possibly can. Now, you've noticed that for the body piece, I've made two sprues for it. One I'm going to be injecting to, and then the other one's going to be to release the air. The reason I'm doing this for the bigger piece is because, well, it's a bigger piece. There's more likelihood that air bubbles are going to form and screw up the mold. You're fine with only making one sprue for the rest of the pieces since they are fairly small. Again, just be very careful in this process. Think about what you're going to do before you do it. So let me show you guys more in detail exactly what I mean by cavities and secure ports or security holes, security stubs, whatever. So those holes, basically you want to dig them deep. You want them to go all the way through the plasticine. This is what's going to keep the mold in place essentially when you're casting. So here you can see the little canal that I've made. Now you want to make sure to make the part of the sprue that's touching the piece thinner than the part of the sprue that's out. Essentially, the part of the sprue that's towards the edge, you want to make it kind of like a hole, because that's where you're going to be pouring in the liquid plastic from. Also here you can see that I've made kind of little sprues connecting to the pieces. This is to make sure that there's no air bubbles and any leftover liquid is moved to these other pieces instead of wasted. I've also made sure that the top and the sides of the mold are going to be where I'm pouring in from. I'm leaving the bottom without any sprues or entry holes whatsoever. That way when we go to cast the actual miniature, we won't have the liquid plastic spilling all over the place. After you're done double checking, triple checking, quadruple checking that all of your security inserts, all of your sprues, everything is just good to go, we want to go ahead and start building up our walls here around our base. You want to make it around 3 times as high as your base was. So in this instance, our base was 1 Lego brick high. So we're going to go ahead and make it 3 Lego bricks high. That way, when we go to start pouring our mold, nothing will spill over. From there, we're ready to move on to the next step. Guys, I can't stress this enough, but it is very important that you get party cups, because it's the birthday of the channel. What? Anyways, back on topic now. Let's go ahead and get out our mold, the silicone rubber. Now this is going to be the final step. So this thing does take about 6 hours to cure. So I would recommend doing this part before you go to work or before you're about to go to bed, since it does take a ridiculously long time. The good thing about getting this specific brand of the silicone rubber that takes 6 hours to cure is that it gives time for all of the air bubbles to exit. Basically, as the mold is curing, the bubbles will slowly rise up to the top. You can shake the actual base a little bit to help get rid of some bubbles. If you do, just shake it gently. This is honestly the easiest part of the process, because all you do is you just mix the mold in a 1-to-1 ratio and you just pour it in. Very simple. Now, with mixing it in a 1-to-1 ratio, you can either weigh it. So for every ounce of part A, you would use an ounce of part B. I personally just like to scoop a spoonful of A with a spoonful of B and mix it together until it is nice and purple. I've noticed that if I go past 3 scoops of part A, then I have to use an extra scoop of part B. So for example, like if I use 3 spoons of part A, I have to use 4 spoons of part B to give me a little bit of a nicer finish, essentially. And once you're done measuring out your ratios, you just mix it in until it's a nice purple color. Or if you're a broke boy, what you can do is you can add an extra spoon of B for every 1 spoon of part A that you use. So if I were to use 1 spoon of part A, I would use 2 spoons of part B. Now this will give you a little bit less detail, but it will make your trial unit go the distance. Because it seems that at the end of the day, B is more liquid than part A. So you will always end up using more part A than necessarily part B. That's why it's important to weigh. But again, this is the broke boy method. You can use whichever one of the 3 methods that I've mentioned previous. They will all give you amazing results in the end. So after an eternity and a half of waiting, it should look a little something like this. So I do apologize that I didn't record the process of me removing the plasticine and me taking down the base, but that's essentially all you want to do. Just remove the plasticine. Then after you've removed the plasticine, you want to completely take apart the base. Now this is another step that I did not record. Again, I do apologize, and if you don't do this, you're going to screw everything up. Trust me, I've done it before. This is the most crucial and important part of the building process. So you want to take out the pieces from the mold, and then you want to go in with your finger and add Vaseline all over the mold. If you don't add Vaseline, the second part of the mold will stick to itself, and you're just gonna have an unusable chunk of mold. And it's like the most frustrating thing that could happen. Whatever you do, don't forget to spread plenty of Vaseline all over the mold. And it's an important distinction that the Vaseline goes on the mold and not on your actual pieces itself. Because if you cover your pieces in Vaseline, you're going to get an ugly looking mold. Again, Vaseline on the mold. If it gets on any of your pieces, clean it out with your finger or get a little paper towel or napkin and just clean your pieces, because this product is very good in picking up whatever detail is in the pieces. So if there's some dirt or grime, one of your hairs gets on the pieces, some Vaseline, it'll copy that, and your piece is gonna come out with a little clump of dirt, weird hairline. It's a headache. Trust me, just clean your pieces before you move to part 2. Another helpful tip before you make the second part of your mold, if you see that the security indents are going to be higher up than your final level of your wall, then you want to clip them. That way they don't come out looking all weird. And just like that, you're finished. All you have to do is just go ahead and pour in the second part of your mold after you've dumped half a bucket of Vaseline in there. Just kidding, guys. Just kidding. You want to put about 2 finger scoops worth of Vaseline on your mold for something around this size. Other than that, just make sure that everything is well mixed. As you can probably tell if you've been following through this project, the cups and the spoons, they're fully reusable. Once the mold has dried up around them, you can just go in and scrape it all out. That way you don't have to keep going and buying new cups over and over again. Another very, very helpful tip, when you go in to pour the rubber mold, you want to make sure to hold the cup high above your base and let it pour in slowly. I recommend pouring it in from a corner and just slowly letting it pour until all of the surface is covered. That way the rubber mold will get through all those nooks and crannies and all those small details that really make the figurine pop. And just like that, we've finished part 2. From here, your mold should be ready to go ahead and start casting. After the second part of the mold is finished curing, you want to go in there with your small X-Acto knife and slowly cut out the indent from the sprues. In the next video, I'll show you guys more in detail what I mean by cutting out the indents that were left over by the sprues. Other than that, we're done. Honestly, building the mold is the hardest part of the process. It requires a lot of thorough cleaning, a lot of going back and forth. You want to make sure that you get the piece perfectly positioned in the plasticine, which takes the longest amount of time. But from here, forging is complete.